You may have seen the headlines recently calling 2025 a year for the history books. More homes listed and fewer homes sold in the greater Vancouver area. And while that's factually true, headlines without context can be a bit misleading. So right now I want to break down what actually happened in the greater Vancouver market at year end for 2025 and how it compares to last year, how it compares to the 10-year average. What it means if you're a buyer and seller going forward, we'll also touch on that. So, in 2025, total residential sales across Greater Vancouver came in at 23,800. That's down 10.4% compared to last year. That's down 24.7% compared to the 10-year average, which sits at 31,625 sales. So yes, sales were lower. In fact, they were among the lowest annual totals we've seen in over 2 decades. But here's the key distinction. It wasn't a lack of interest. It was a lack of confidence and it was a confidence and affordability pause, driven largely by interest rates and by buyer psychology. So let's talk about supply, because this is where the story really changes. In 2025, we saw 65,335 new listings come to market. That's an 8.2% increase from last year and a 13.1% increase above the 10-year average, which sits at 57,782 listings. In fact, it was the highest number of active new listings since mid-1990s. It even surpassed the 2008 recession period. So sellers were active, very active, even while buyers were cautious and not that active. At year end, active listings sat approximately at 12,550 homes available, which represents a 14.6% increase compared to last year and a massive 34.8% increase compared to the 10-year average, which typically sits at 9,308 listings by year end. This is one of the biggest structural shifts we've seen. Buyers finally have selection, they finally have time to look and leverage, something that simply did not exist for most of the last 2 decades. Despite low sales and high inventory, prices remain relatively stable. The MLS benchmark price for all residential properties finished at the end of 2025 at $1,114,800. That's down 4.5% year over year, and now compare that to the sales decline of nearly 25% versus the 10-year average. That tells us something critical. Prices have softened, but they did not collapse. This is a classic example of volume correction, not volume collapse. The sales to active listings ratio finished the year at 12.7%. And at 12.7%, we are technically in a balanced market, but leaning slightly towards buyers. And this explains why well-priced homes are still selling, why overpriced homes are sitting, why negotiation has returned, but there's not desperation in the water. For buyers, this market quietly offered the best conditions we've seen in years. They had more listings than normal, there was less competition, there was time for inspections and due diligence and subject to sales, and negotiation power came back that didn't exist before. This was a strategic buyer's market, but not a panic market. For sellers, 2025 rewarded realism. Homes that were correctly priced, well presented, and properly marketed still sold. But the days of just listed and they will come are gone, at least for now. If you're a seller, you definitely had to be realistic in 2025. So yes, 2025 was unusual. But when we compare it today to the 10-year average, what we're seeing is a market that is resetting back towards historical norms, not a market that's breaking down. So the takeaway is that this is no longer a momentum market, it's a strategic market. And in markets like this, informed decisions always outperform emotional ones. If you need any real estate help, I'm Roland Kim with the Greater Vancouver Realtor Association, and I'm here to help if I can be. Reach out to me. Thanks.